Welcome. I'm trying to see why my okay, hit the stage. Hi,
Hi,
Pam.
hello.
Trying to see why my screen is not working right. Let's see here.
Okay.
'Cause I don't see us on the screen like I was before I went live.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go. That's that. Do you see us on the screen?
I see myself on the screen. I do not see your face on the screen. Do you see me?
Not on the screen. I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. It says you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you. That's the message I've gotten.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
I see you. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Good evening, everyone.
So now we don't have anybody on yet,
Okay. No problem.
but it's okay.
Let me, as we're waiting for people to join, make
Yeah,
sure I have, I got my little stand. I have my stand. Um, and I am ready whenever you would like for me to begin.
okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure people will join shortly.
Okay. All right.
So um, I'm just going to start off with welcoming everyone. Um, Welcome to our Hidden Scars, a space where masks come off and healing begins. Here, we honor the truth of what we've carried, the strength it took to survive, and the courage it takes to speak. This is a place for tears, laughter, reflections, and release. So take a deep breath, let your guard down, and remember your scars are not your shame. They are proof you're still becoming. Since 2021, Just Be You Incorporated has been hosting our Hidden Scars. We are proud to have a very special guest tonight, my friend Pamela Hughes. And let me tell you a little bit about her. So, Pamela is a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience in mental health and life counseling, life coaching. Since 2007, she's become a certified sex offender treatment provider. And in 2016, she expanded her practice to include certified life coaching. As a clinical supervisor, motivational speaker, and relationship coach, she's deeply passionate about helping individuals and couples transform toxic patterns into healthy, fulfilling relationships. Her approach blends personal experience, education, and spirituality, allowing her to guide others through more meaningful and balanced connections. She is committed to supporting us and you as you walk in purpose and create lasting positive change, empowering you to live your best life. So, Pamela is joining us tonight to talk about to talk about her experience with domestic violence. So, Pam, feel free to um, add on and tell your story how you feel like you want to tell it, and as much as you want to tell it.
All right. Well, first and foremost, let me first say thank you, Miss Yolanda. I call her Miss Yolanda, everyone. Thank you, Miss Yolanda. Miss Yolanda has always been a friend to me, but as well as like a mentor in the field. You know, she's so passionate about, everybody living healthier lives inside and out. And so I am very grateful
Miss
to have
Yolanda,
her in my
everyone.
life, and I'm very grateful that I was invited to speak to you all tonight.
You
I
know, she's
told,
so passionate.
excuse me.
Go ahead. That was my phone accidentally. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're okay. You're okay. Um, I wanted to say to each and every one of you, as as Yolanda was going over my bio, a little bit about myself is that I do spend a lot of time in my private practice focusing on relationships, especially talking with and training clients on the importance of healthy relationships versus the toxic ones. And so I want to start by talking a little bit about my background and how I came to be where I'm at. I've always been that friend since middle school, where I would have my friends just come up to me and want to talk with me about their problems or their issues. They would seek advice, and I really felt good, handling that, spending time with them, helping them in any way that I could. In addition to that, over time, by the time I got to high school, because this was many moons ago, everybody. But by the time I got to high school, I was really able to. I knew that I wanted to do something that involved me helping others in some type of way, and I knew that I could give good advice. I would always, make sure that I took into account the person's, life experiences, their, even at a young age, what they were going through at home or in school or what have you. And I knew that, I wanted to do something in that type of field. I just didn't know what that was called at that time. So it wasn't until I got to high school, and I'm talking about my senior year of high school, where I learned about psychology and I learned about sociology. And so, I ended up, loving, those courses. I learned so much about the human mind and how it works, their behaviors and how we socialize with others in our world. And so I, was fascinated about that. And I didn't realize at the time that I'd had some experiences even as a child that kind of led me to wanting to feel the need to help others, to live healthier lifestyles. So I'm originally from New Jersey. I'll just call my state out. I'm originally from New Jersey. And I remember growing up as a little kid. When I was a little kid, I remember that my family has always been very, very close knit, always had a close family. I can't even remember in those earlier childhood days of my family not getting together. Every fond memory is us getting together, having, crab fest nights, having, card games going on. We would, it'd be a lot of laughter and even some house parties. We just always were together. So I always believed that family, it was, is a to have a family is a wonderful thing, especially if it's a healthy family. I learned the importance of family values and connections with other people. And so my first memory of just being really sad when it came to family, was when we left. We moved to Virginia. My parents, my family, my parents, my sister, we moved to Virginia. And I was devastated. I did not know how I was going to survive this. I cried a lot. I remember crying a lot, and I was really young. And I remember during that time when I was so sad and missing them, I noticed that there was some changes starting to happen in my own household. Now that I'm in Virginia, we're not around a whole bunch of family. We do have family here, but I'm learning them because I don't know them, as a child. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing I remember is feeling very isolated, feeling very lonely and confused. And I tried to get back to Jersey any way I could, begging family members to please take me in. But of course, I stayed with my family here, and we would go back. Me and my sister would go for summers and all of that, and we were still able to maintain connections in that way. But it just wasn't the same. It wasn't that same level of closeness as people grew older. We kind of started to go our separate ways. But one thing that I did, I'm gonna come back to what I learned and picked up on, was now that I didn't have my bigger family unit around me, I started to notice as a child that my parents were not getting along. um, they were not getting along, and it was getting bad. And I just remember, again, feeling confused, not understanding what was going on. But they were constantly getting to these fights. They were having, verbal altercations. And it would get so loud. And again, I'm not trying to bash my parents. They could be listening to this. I'm not trying to bash them. But what I'm saying is, I knew that they were, back then, I knew that they had always been a united front and had always been very close with me and my sister. But when this was happening, so all this change is happening. I'm in a new environment. I'm meeting new people. I'm grieving, being away from, the family that I've always known as a little kid that I love. And now I'm here trying to adjust, to going to a new school here, meeting new people. And where I'm from, we didn't ride no school bus. We walked to school. But down here, I had to ride a school bus. So I'm learning different things, and I was very shy and timid child. But my home life was changing so drastically. I remember witnessing some arguments, between my parents, arguments that I would never have wanted to witness. Never, no child should ever witness, and they shouldn't have been having that level of disagreement. But it just got worse and worse, and so it went from verbal altercations to now physical. And I remember seeing, a lot of, and I'm going to be transparent, and this is in even at this great old age of 49, years young, it still, hurts me, to my core. So I hope I don't get emotional, but I will disclose, so I remember I'm going to describe some of the instances of things that just remained in my brain, and I'm going to let you all know how that still impacts me to this day. So we moved to Virginia, my parents started arguing. My mother clearly missed being back home, and she wasn't happy with the move. But felt that this would, she was going along with my father. He felt like, I believe that there's great opportunities for education, etc., being in Virginia. So we left. While we were there, my father, I noticed my mom and him, would, come into each other's body space. My dad, I never understood or saw what led to the disagreement or the altercation, but it got to the point where my father would just hit my mother. I remember this one time we were in the car. I just remember being in the back seat, and we were like stopped. The car wasn't in motion at this point. I don't know exactly where we were, but I just remember an argument coming, starting out of nowhere. I mean, it went from 0 to 100 just like that. And during that time, I just saw my dad, just punch my mother in the nose, and her nose started to bleed. And I just remember being in shock, like, what just happened? Did my baby sister see this? Like, I don't want her to see this. I'm scared. I'm scared in the car. I don't know what to do. My mom is, crying a bit. And so that was one incident. There was never a sit down to talk with me and my sister. We were little, but there wasn't a sit down to explain to us that what happened we shouldn't have saw. What we were exposed to wasn't right. I don't recall there ever being like any remorse or apology. And so I never got to see, that situation be resolved. And so over time, the situations just progress. The fighting, the arguing, it just progressed. And so another encounter I remember, seeing in my home was my dad, put a knife in my mother's throat. And I'm like, so afraid. I'm so afraid. I feel like it's escalating, it's getting worse. I feel powerless. I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I remember it went from that to him knocking her in the floor one time and her hurting her back, injuring her back. I remember around this time, let me just share this. This is what my brain was thinking at that time. I remember some of the thoughts I would have is I just wish they would just break up. I don't want my daddy here anymore. You know, and then I would look at my mom and I would feel, helpless. Like, I would feel like, I wanted to reach out and help her, but I wasn't able to do that. It was nothing that I could do to protect her or him from, hurting her. And so I just kind of, with this, once the situation fizzled down, I just kind of went into my little safe space, my bedroom, but it didn't stop. And there was one particular day that let me just explain a little backdrop. In the little town that we lived in at the time was very, very rural. And so we had to drive long distances to get to a store, a grocery store, etc. So I remember we had one little post office, in our little town. And at that time, I had a little friend in my grade, and her mother worked at the post office. And I remember one night, just being home. And of course, back then we didn't have cable. So we only had like 4 channels. So we watched those channels because we watched on TV. And I remember we were watching the news and it was revealed that my friend's dad killed his wife, killed her mother in my little town. And it had dropped her body into the Appomattox River. And I'm not trying to horrify anybody by sharing this detail. I'm just trying to create the scenario as to what I was dealing with. And this is like young elementary school age. So this happened anywhere between the ages of 6 to like 10 years old. So I remember being so scared, I didn't know what to do. So then, fast forward, one particular night, we were at home. I was doing my homework. We were already in pajamas at that point. So it had to be about 7, 8 or something like that. And I remember I heard this gun, this go off, this pow in my house. And as soon as it happened, my heart just sank. At that moment, I just thought my mom was gone, like my friend's mom. Um, and I was so scared, and I didn't know if I was going to be shot. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And so I remember that second, those seconds just seemed like minutes and hours to me. And then all of a sudden, I heard my mom yell, and she ran out of the room. And I just remember, her grabbing my hand, and she had my sister on her hip, and we ran across the yard to our neighbors, which was my mother's uncle, paternal uncle, and his family. And so I felt like, okay, I felt that instant relief, but I was thinking, is he following us? Is he going to shoot us next? I just didn't understand what was going on. Um, and I know that it was that particular incident and one other incident before it that it was the worst fight that they had, that I actually got hit in it. I actually got boiling hot water splashed on me, in the midst of this. And so for me, I just constantly lived in a state of fear. I was constantly walking on eggshells because I didn't know when the other shoe was going to drop. And I remember that night when that gun went off, and my dad shot it in the roof, actually, the ceiling, and we ran. And I remember feeling safe because I was like, my great uncle, he's a big guy, and he has rifles, he has guns, he's a hunter and everything. So I felt safe and protected by him. And so I remember after that when that incident happened, my dad came over. He came over begging for my uncle to let him speak to my mother and us. And I was just praying, like, don't let him come through here. Don't let him come. Send him away. But my uncle was saying some things to him like, listen, I'm gonna let you know it's not happening no more, that type of thing. But he did allow my dad to speak to my mother, and we eventually went back home that same night. And I just felt so scared, always scared, to the point where when my mother finally had enough, and after taking him back a few times, she finally was like, enough is enough, and she was moving towards getting divorced, is when I felt the safest, because my dad wasn't that way when it was just us and him. It was whatever dynamic they had going on that brought out the worst in him, the worst in her. And I just was very, very, very resentful for many years to both of them, honestly. I was resentful towards him for the obvious reasons, like, how dare you, do cause my mother that harm, and how dare you do that in front of your kids? Do you understand what that did to us? What we saw and how that impacted our lives, right? So on the one hand, I was feeling like that towards him. On the other hand, with my mother, I was frustrated and angry with her. I looked at her and I said, I remember when he knocked her on the floor that time, and her back was hurting. She was, wailing in pain. I remember thinking to myself, no man is going to ever treat me like this. It's not happening. That will never be me. And I meant that with every part of my being and my soul. Nobody's going to ever make me feel that disempowered in my life. So time went on, I'm getting older. I'm learning about, in hindsight, I'm thinking about all of this. And, I had, for a while, I kind of buried it because along this time, my adolescence was a time period for me that wasn't the safest. I was groped a lot by boys. I was, you know, constantly being hit on as a kid, at 12, 13, 14, just riding the bus. The bus was a dangerous place for me at that time. But I just learned to make the best of it. I just coped. I would make the best of it. I was bullied for a period of time. I had to stand up to my bullies for it to stop. Nobody ever helped me with any of those things. And I really didn't tell nobody. I just felt like, what is somebody going to do? How is somebody going to protect me if I couldn't even be protected in my own home? Like, who am I going to really tell that's going to help me? So I just learned how to deal. I learned how to cope. But I didn't realize I was pulling up all these walls, building up all these walls to protect me. And so in my future relationships, I would find that it I was very hard on a man. I was like, I'm very sweet and kind and bubbly, and people would see that side of me. My friend group, I'm very loving, very sweet. Not that rah rah person, but it was when I was involved with a guy, and I even felt like he was trying to control me in some way or something. I would just lose it. I would spaz out, and he would know, and he might be afraid because I was so angry. And I used to say to myself, something isn't right here. Like, this is not right. Yes, I should protect myself. But from people misabusing me, I should be able to protect myself. But at the same time, I'm easily angered. If they look at me the wrong way or say something, I'm like, I'm gonna let you know. And I remember when I was married, and I was pregnant with my first child. I remember my husband. We were, I felt like he was being disrespectful towards my mother, and that, I had to defend my mother, but it wasn't just that. It was something about him that would get on my nerves. And so I was pregnant, and I remember, him pushing me, and I just went and I just punched him dead in his face. And my nieces were around. They were little, and I just remember feeling so scared, so bad. And as I thought about my life, I thought about different areas of my life with my cousins, other family members. I come from a family of fighters. I come from a family of people that throw down. And so I witnessed, I realized, not even in my own, not even outside of my own family, my home, that is, my family were violent towards each other too. So, and I witnessed even those fights. I was present for some fights. Blood going this way, that way, broken glass, I was around this. And I, again, always felt unsafe and scared. So I always vowed, I said, you know what? I'm not going to have that type of relationship or whatever. Um, I'm not going to have that type of relationship. And one thing that I had to do for myself is, one thing about me, I really like trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, in that it generally over time exposes you to your fear so you can get over your fear, right? So I remember, for me, I said, I'm gonna jump in this. I got a job, a part-time job, in my early 20s. And I was running groups for the city of Chesapeake and Virginia Beach. Chesapeake and Norfolk. I was running groups for men and women that the court sent to me, because of domestic violence. And so I was running this 18-week anger management / domestic violence group, because I was like, in order for me to really continue to work through this, I have to address this population. And I will say, I gotta, give myself a pat. It was challenging at times, but I treated my clients just like I would any client in any practice that I have right now, including those who have committed offenses. I've been the same way with everyone, ethically, legally, morally. And so what I was able to do is, I was really able to utilize that part of me, that professional part of me, to really, I'm not saying that, people never fought again. What I'm saying is, some of the things I was able to get through and see the progress of some of those people, it really made me feel good. And I felt like, not only are they as a group learning, but I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm hearing the difficult things that they're saying. I'm empathizing, with the various situations they had been in. And so that at that point, and from that point on, I didn't have any more issues with that. I remember, um, me and my sister years ago sat down with our dad. We sat down with him and we let him know, like, that was, did you realize how scary that was for us? Do you realize and understand that that was, just awful? And he apologized. My dad was able to genuinely apologize, and how I knew that he was genuine outside of just his facial expression, his nonverbal cues, and what he said was that he had remarried and he had been in that marriage for a while. And I see whenever I would be in his presence, we would be in his presence, he did not present the same way. We did not see, him. He grew from that. And then hindsight, I realized, I said, well, you know what? Guess what? This is a cycle. Because guess what? My dad and my mom got married right out of high school, really. They were like 19, 20 when they got married. They were 21, and they were pregnant with me. So they were very young. And then when I think back and I start hearing the history, I'm asking questions of my grandparents. And I'm finding out that my grandpa, used to beat on my grandma, and she left him, so it's this a cycle happening. And so I said to myself, I said, you know what? I don't ever want my children or my nieces, to ever go through anything like that. Anything like that. So we are, so since that time, as I've gone through and, years have passed and everything, we taught our kids, not to fight. I mean, and I'm not gonna lie and say that I don't have my moments and I don't have my flaws, because my mom was a yeller. And I started thinking back to, okay, maybe some of that was happening, that, her communication to my dad, that would get under his skin, and not that it justified anything, but they didn't fight fair. And so, and they didn't, and then he didn't see fair fights with his parents. I think my mom was the one who had more of the solid, grounded marriage between her parents, because they were married her whole life until they died. But I did say, I said, you know what? I don't want to fight with my husband. I don't want to fight in relationships. I don't want my kids doing this. I will say, I had to learn that you picked up some bad habits, Pamela. You argue. I mean, you yell, you fuss, you yell. You don't have to raise your voice that loud. You need to learn how to talk, even kill. You know, um, when I would yell, I could see that it impacted my son. And I'm like, okay, it's starting to cycle again, right? He would has had his own relationship issues as well. So he had to go to anger management. We had been a family that had to work on that. And I tell everybody, I said, listen, I'm a therapist, right? I'm a clinician, but therapists have therapists too, and I have a therapist too. So, and a lot of my therapist friends do as well. It's because of that. You need to be able to have somebody that can hold you accountable in a way that makes you look at every aspect of your being and say, okay, in what areas do I need to improve in? Where do I need to break this cycle? How can I help people today, knowing what I know and being through what I've been through? How do I now teach people how to have healthy relationships and how to leave the toxic ones? How do I help people to be able to engage appropriately when they do have toxic people in their life that they just can't get away from? And what I mean by that is, there's people on your job that may be toxic. And although anybody can walk away from a job, we all know that you need to have a backup, so you can maintain your bills and your lifestyle, etc. But you're going to have friends, family members that have um, these toxic personalities. And so I've been able to do a lot of good relationship work in my practice. I even worked with sex offenders, and we're talking about sexual abuse, and I'll leave that for another day because a lot of times when you have and you see some of that domestic violence, sometimes you do see some sexual, abuse happening as well. Because at the end of the day, it's about power and control, any abuse. So I say that to say I made sure that I learned how to work with some of the most challenging populations because I didn't want to have that over me. I wanted to be able to make a difference in my community. To say, for example, you don't want the guy next door, your neighbor, if he's an offender. You don't want the guy, up the street beating his wife on your block and the police coming every second or every other day, and vice versa. Because let me just say this: women are the same way now. This is not about men versus women. Women are the same way. When I was teaching those running those groups, I had women that went in there for stabbing their partners, etc. I mean, so it's both ways. We all have the ability to become violent in certain situations. So I had to really learn that, you know, we have to do better, and we're able to do better because as I continue to do the work, what I've come to realize is that we have a lot of people within the Black community, especially, that are engaged in toxic relationships, and people end up uh, dead or injured really badly, and those emotional scars, linger. They linger.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I've said a lot and I've jumped all around. I don't know if anybody has any comments or have any questions at all, or can even relate to some of the things I'm talking about. But I would like to hear from others. And thank you for listening to me as I became vulnerable because I don't talk about this much. During the counseling relationship, you don't disclose all of this stuff unless you believe that certain pieces of things can help somebody else. This is you tell your therapist and your trusted, friends or loved ones about some of this stuff. But that's it. So again, thank y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. Someone wanted to know, how do you deal with the trauma that you went through? What were the ways that you did that?
Okay, thank you for that question. When I was going through it as a child, I would just try to avoid it. I would just try to not frustrate, my parents. I didn't want to see any blow ups. I tried to be a good kid. So therefore, honestly, when I think about the bullying, the times I was being bullied, I didn't feel comfortable telling them anything because I didn't want another. I didn't want no more issues. I wanted the house to remain peaceful. So I learned to be a peacemaker, which is not all the way good. So I'm gonna explain that. I can be an appeaser if I really, really want to. I used to do that a lot back in the day. I didn't, don't rock the boat, let it be. But over time, one of the things I had to do, and I mentioned this a little while, I had to research, I had to learn more about it so that I could face it. I had to learn about it more, and I put myself in situations where I had to learn it, and I had to learn how to I talk with my friends sometimes, my family, sometimes I talk to them, those that I trusted and felt safe sharing that with. Because I think that if you don't share with anyone, then you just stuff it and it doesn't go away. One of the things that I had to learn too is to communicate. When in a relationship, I had to say, you know what? Because I remember this one time in this is before I got married. I was in college or whatever, graduate school actually, and I was a dorm director at that time, and so I ran a building of students and all the staff that were in that building. So I remember I was in this relationship, and I got very angry at something that my then boyfriend said, and I just was like, you know, yeah, I got real rah rah, and he had to restrain me. Like he held me down He never got violent. He never was, cursed, yelled, or anything. He was like, "It's okay, calm down." And so I will admit, when that happened, I was like, and I thought about it, I said, he really didn't do anything that much that warranted that type of response from me. So much so that he had to like restrain me. And I'm like, I felt embarrassed. I was like, wait a minute. This is not who I am. I don't like that. So let me do something about it. And it didn't help that I knew that my family, look, I come from some women that can battle. They can battle. And so I was like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I need peace and calm. So at some point I did start counseling, and maybe counseling for different reasons. When I felt like my dad could receive it, that was the big part of it. When me and my sister got to talk to my father, because I had so much animosity towards him. We had a falling out, and he didn't know what was going on with me. He didn't know why I was upset. And in my mind, I just kept replaying back and forth all the times that he let me down, when he would even after the divorce, he would talk about my mother, and that's a sensitive topic for me, but he didn't realize that because he wasn't thinking. He wasn't thinking about that. So when I was finally able to have that conversation with him, it really helped me to release a lot of that. And so, and as I grew older, went to school, got education in this field, that helped a lot too. Other people shared their stories, and I just learned better ways to cope. But communication is key. You gotta, whoever you're with, you gotta be honest with them and yourself to be able to say, you know what, I still need to work in this area. I should not be getting this upset over something like that. It's never okay to put your hands on anybody. It's never okay. I go over fair fighting rules with my clients presently. We talk about, you know, appropriate fair fighting rules when you're in a relationship. No hitting below the belt. No yelling, cursing, screaming, hollering, demeaning anybody, name calling, none of that. Never like I said, never hit below the belt, never say something that once you say it, it cannot be unsaid. Choose your words wisely, take breaks, communicate with each other, but give each other an opportunity to express themselves. Um, Take notes, when you're upset, journaling, taking notes, trying to get whatever is going on in here out of your head and onto paper so that you can see and be able to look at what's really bothering you. Go to counseling, seek help. Go to a counselor that maybe specializes in trauma informed care, or relationships, marriage and family therapists, etc. We've all had this level of training now to be able to identify negative behavioral patterns, negative ways of thinking, dysfunctional beliefs, irrational thinking. These are some of the things that I go over with my clients, and let them know the dangers of toxic relationships. Today people, we have a society now that everybody's impulsive. They want immediate gratification. They want to hear. They want it now. They don't have a lot of accountability partners. I can do what I want when I want. However I want. Some of them view, they have really poor uh, basic skill sets, and I say that to say, when you have AI and technology doing a lot of things for you, you don't have to do the things that we learned growing up, in generations before us, and then I'm Generation X. We had to look a person in their eye and have manners, shake their hands, say good morning, good evening. People don't always do that. They feel entitled. And so when you have dysfunctional belief systems, and irrational, thoughts and impulsive behaviors, you can be very dangerous to somebody.
Yeah. Um, Have you noticed patterns that you had to intentionally unlearn from that experience?
Um, yes. What I've learned for me, I can speak for myself personally. What I've learned is number one, I have to do an emotions check when I start, because I know that anger, that's a secondary emotion. So there's some primary emotion that I have to identify, and for me, it has been anxiety. So when I get anxious, and I can't think clearly, I'm overwhelmed. I find myself becoming more irritable and frustrated. So I don't have or if I don't have good enough sleep. If I'm not feeling well, anything could throw my mood out, and change it up that fast. So I have to make sure that I have self awareness. I know myself. I do temperature checks with my emotions. I'll give an example. Today is 2 days ago. I was anxious during the day. I was anxious all day, and I had to and I had to sit down with myself at some point and say, okay, what's going on? Let's identify what's happening. Now I'm not talking to myself out loud, but like that, but I'm by myself thinking about it, and I was able to say, okay, this has happened, that has happened. My brother-in-law um, is on life support right now. Very, I'm anxious about that. I've been able to say, okay, my toilet, started overflowing in the same day. And then I had two other things happen, and I was like, this is why you're feeling this way. Go sit down and breathe. And I sat down. I had to sit down. I actually had to breathe and not talk. Just sit down and be quiet. And I ended up going to the hospital with my sister and my nieces. And I was in the back. They picked me up. I was sitting there and said, y'all, I just need to breathe a little bit. I just need to calm down. I'm frustrated, and this is why. So I'm sitting with myself. So that is an example of first gaining self awareness. Don't just allow yourself to be in a negative space and not check yourself. You got to be able to, maybe journal, write something out, go listen to something positive, like a podcast, for instance. Go read the word, pray. I incorporate these type of things, meditation, because I have to get my heart rate down, in order for me to think clearly. And I got to take a break from whatever it is I'm doing. It's not working for me right now. I got to take a break. Sometimes I got to go for a walk, just to calm down, because what's not acceptable is me going off and put my hands on somebody, or breaking stuff. And I don't do that type of stuff. I haven't done that in a very, very long time anyway. I don't normally do that anyway. But what I'm saying is I can't allow myself to get out of character. I'm an adult. I have kids. I have nephews and nieces. I have to model appropriate behavior for them. So they are definitely part of my motivation.
Wonderful. Sherry says, thanks for sharing your story and for your honesty.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shirley. Thank all of you. I
Sherry.
appreciate it.
Yes. So as we close tonight's conversation, I want to say thank you for watching, for listening, and holding space with us. To our guest, Pamela, thank you for your courage, your honesty, and your willingness to share your testimony of surviving domestic violence. Your story is not just your story. It is a light for someone else still finding their way out of darkness. If tonight's conversation touched anyone, reminded you of your strength, or helped you feel less alone, know that your story matters too. Healing is possible, support is real, and you are worthy of safety, love, and peace. Pam, is there anything you want to say before we end?
The only thing that I want to say, again, thank you. Thank each and every one of you. If you are experiencing anything that is hurtful or painful for you, you have had some trauma that you have not yet addressed, or may need to continue to have it addressed, make sure that you're seeking out, social supports, community supports like therapists, you know, life coaches, listen to some podcasts, but do something. Don't just let it happen.
Thank you. So this is our hidden scars. And we have our next episode on next Thursday, March the 5th, where a friend of mine will be coming to talk about how her daughter's crisis restored her faith. If you want to join us, let me know and we can get you scheduled. Your story is not just for you, it's for everyone. Your scars are proof that you survived. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great night and thank you again,
Thank
Pam.
you. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Bye bye.